I was fired and humiliated in front of the entire office. But then, the janitor walked up to me, handed me a key, and quietly said. Jake Miller stared at his computer screen, the cursor blinking mockingly at him like it knew something he didn't. Third cup of coffee already, and it wasn't even 10 a.m. The Henderson Associates office buzzed around him, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, Sarah Chen arguing with someone about font sizes 2 cubicles over. He'd been working on this campaign for 3 months. 3 months of staying late, of sketching ideas on napkins during lunch, of dreaming about it. The Reynolds account could change everything for the company. Hell, it could change everything for him. Morning, Jake. Frank Rodriguez appeared beside his desk with that quiet way janitors have, like they're part of the furniture, until you actually notice them. Old guy, maybe 60-something, always had this knowing look in his eyes. Been cleaning these offices longer than Jake had been alive, probably. Hey Frank, you're here early today. Frank emptied Jake's trash can, but his movement seemed different somehow. Slower, more deliberate. Big day today, isn't it? Your presentation. Jake nodded, surprised Frank even knew about it. But then again, janitors see everything. They're invisible to most people, which meant they heard everything too. Your grandfather, Frank said suddenly, then stopped himself. Shook his head. Never mind. Good luck today, son. Before Jake could ask what the hell that meant, Frank was gone. Jake's grandfather had died when he was 7. Some business thing. His mom never talked about it much, said it was too painful. Sarah Chen poked her head over the cubicle wall. Her hair was doing that thing where it stuck up on one side. She'd been running her hands through it again. You ready for this? Ready as I'll ever be. Jake pulled up his presentation slides one more time. The campaign was solid, revolutionary even. It would put Henderson Associates on the map and maybe, just maybe, get him out of this cubicle and into an actual office with walls. Richard Stone's voice boomed across the floor. Conference room, people. Reynolds' presentation in 5. Jake's stomach did something acrobatic. This was it. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. Jake sat at the far end of the long table, his laptop open, presentation ready. Richard Stone paced at the front like a caged animal in his expensive suit that probably cost more than Jake's rent. Gentlemen, Richard addressed the Reynolds clients, completely ignoring the 2 women in the room. Today, we're going to show you something special. Something that's going to revolutionize how people think about sustainable packaging. Jake straightened up. That was his line, word for word. Richard clicked to the first slide. Jake's slide, his design, his concept. What the hell? Jake whispered, but Sarah grabbed his arm. Wait, she mouthed. But Jake couldn't wait. 3 months of work was being presented by his boss like it was Richard's own brilliant idea. Every slide, every tagline, every innovative concept, all of it stolen. Excuse me. Jake stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. That's my presentation. The room went quiet. One of the Reynolds executives raised an eyebrow. Richard's face turned an interesting shade of red. I'm sorry, what did you say, Miller? That's my campaign, my ideas, my work for the past 3 months. Richard's laugh was sharp, cutting. Your work, Miller, you're a junior associate. You couldn't come up with something like this if your life depended on it. I have the original files, timestamps, email drafts, I can prove. You can prove nothing. Richard slammed his hand on the table. You're delusional if you think anyone believes you created this. Look at yourself, Miller. Look at this room. Look at these successful people. And then, look at you. The words hit like physical blows. Jake felt everyone's eyes on him, the clients, his colleagues, Sarah's horrified face. You're fired, Richard continued, his voice getting louder. Clear out your desk. Security will escort you out. And if I hear you spreading lies about stealing work, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Jake stood there, speechless. The Reynolds executives were shifting uncomfortably. Sarah looked like she might cry. Did you hear me, Miller? You're done. Finished. Get out of my sight. 20 minutes later, Jake was walking through the lobby with a cardboard box that contained 3 years of his life, a coffee mug Sarah had given him for his birthday. a small cactus that somehow survived the office's fluorescent lighting. His grandfather's old compass, the only thing he had left from him. People were staring. Of course they were staring. Word traveled fast in an office building. By now, everyone probably knew Jake Miller had been fired for trying to steal credit for work that wasn't his. The story would get twisted, like stories always do. His hands were shaking, not from the cold. Chicago's October wasn't that harsh yet, but from rage, from humiliation, from the crushing realization that 3 years of loyalty meant absolutely nothing. Jake. He turned around. Frank Rodriguez was standing by the elevator bank holding his cleaning cart, but he wasn't moving toward the elevators. He was just waiting. Frank, Here. Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out an old brass key. Heavy, ornate, like something from a vintage movie. Room 1247, Riverside Building on Clark Street. Jake stared at the key. What? I don't understand. Frank stepped closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Your grandfather would be proud of what you did up there. Standing up for yourself. Most people don't have that kind of courage. My grandfather? Frank, what are you talking about? He died when I was a kid. I barely remember him. Frank's eyes had that look again, like he knew secrets that could change everything. Room 1247, Jake. Go today, before it's too late. Before? What's too late? Frank, you're not making any sense. But when Jake looked up from the key, Frank was gone, vanished like he'd never been there at all. The only proof of the conversation was the cold brass weight in Jake's palm. Jake stood in the lobby for another minute, people flowing around him like he was a rock in a stream. The key felt warm now, or maybe his hand was just sweating. Room 1247, Riverside Building. What the hell did he have to lose? The Riverside Building was one of those old Chicago structures that looked like it had stories to tell. Jake had passed it 1,000 times, but never really looked at it. Now, standing in front of the weathered brick facade, he felt like he was seeing it for the first time. The elevator creaked its way to the 12th floor. The hallway smelled like dust and old carpet. Room 1247 was at the end, marked with a small brass plate that matched the key in his hand. The key turned easily, like it had been waiting for him. Inside was a storage unit, bigger than he'd expected. Boxes lined the walls, and in the center sat an old desk with a leather chair behind it. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, but Jake could see this place had been important once. He opened the first box with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. A young man who looked remarkably like Jake, standing in front of a building Jake recognized, the Henderson Associates building, but newer, cleaner. The sign above the door read Miller Associates. Miller, his grandfather's name. Jake's heart started pounding. He opened another box. Business documents, contracts, legal papers with his grandfather's signature, Thomas Miller, scattered across decades. And then he found the letter. Jake. If you're reading this, then Frank kept his promise. I hope you're old enough to understand what I'm about to tell you. Miller Associates was our family business. I built it from nothing, starting in 1978. We were small but honest, and we grew because we did good work for good people. In 1995, my business partner, a man named James Henderson, came to me with financial troubles. I trusted him. I helped him. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed. He stole everything, the company, the contracts, even the building. He used legal loopholes and forged documents to make it look like I was the junior partner, like the company had always been his. I couldn't fight it. I didn't have the money for lawyers, and Henderson had connections I didn't. I lost everything, including my health from the stress. But Frank Rodriguez was my friend before he was Henderson's janitor. He's been keeping evidence all these years, documents Henderson thought were destroyed, proof of the forgeries, proof of what really happened. The company that fired you today was built on fraud. It belongs to our family. It belongs to you. Be careful, Jake. Henderson is dead, but his son Richard carries on the family tradition. They're still stealing, still cheating, Frank will help you. Trust him like I trusted him. Make them pay. Your grandfather, Thomas Miller. Jake read the letter 3 times before it sank in. Richard Stone wasn't just his boss. Richard Stone was the son of the man who destroyed his grandfather. And Henderson Associates, the company that had just humiliated him, was rightfully his. Frank was waiting for Jake in the building's lobby, sitting in one of those uncomfortable modern chairs like he'd been there for hours. You found it, Frank said. It wasn't a question. Jake sat down across from him, the letter still clutched in his hand. Why didn't you tell me sooner? All these years, why didn't you say anything? Frank's weathered hands folded in his lap. Your grandfather made me promise to wait. He said you needed to understand what kind of people they were first, what they were capable of. He said you needed to choose your own path. But watching Richard steal my work today, watching him fire me, was the last straw. I know. Frank reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. I've been collecting evidence for 28 years, Jake. Every shady deal, every forged signature, every time Richard thought no one was watching. Jake opened the envelope. Bank records, email printouts, photocopies of contracts with suspicious alterations. It was enough to bury Richard Stone and everyone who helped him. There's more, Frank continued. Richard's been embezzling from the company for years. Small amounts, but it adds up. He thinks he's clever, but janitors have access to offices after hours. We see the documents left on desks. We empty the trash cans with the crumpled receipts. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Are you okay? What happened up there was horrible. Call me. I need help, Jake said. I can't do this alone. Frank smiled. The first real smile Jake had ever seen from him. You won't be alone. Sarah's been asking questions all afternoon. She doesn't believe Richard's story. And your friend Marcus from IT, he's been wondering why Richard's computer activity shows him accessing your files at 3 a.m. Marcus knows? Smart kid. He called me an hour ago. Apparently, the IT system logs everything, and he's been saving backup files of suspicious activity for months. He never trusted Richard either. Jake felt something he hadn't felt since walking out of that conference room. Hope. So what's the plan? Frank leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Tomorrow is the quarterly board meeting. All the company executives will be there, plus the 3 board members who actually make decisions. Richard's planning to present his campaign to them as proof he deserves a promotion to regional director. And we're going to crash that party. Jake walked into the Henderson Associates building at exactly 10:47 a.m., 17 minutes after the quarterly board meeting had started. He wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago, and carried a briefcase Frank had given him. Inside were copies of every document, every piece of evidence, every proof of fraud they'd collected. Sarah was waiting by the reception desk, pretending to organize files. She gave him the slightest nod. Marcus had done his part beautifully. At 10:30, the building's internet had mysteriously gone down. At 10:45, it came back up, but with a few modifications to the conference room's display system that would let Jake control what appeared on the main screen. Jake took the elevator to the 14th floor. Through the conference room's glass walls, he could see Richard in full presentation mode, gesturing wildly at the screen showing Jake's stolen campaign. Frank appeared beside him like a ghost. Security's handled. Turns out the head of security remembers your grandfather fondly. He'll make sure no one leaves until this is finished. Jake pushed open the conference room door. And that's why this campaign represents the future of sustainable marketing, Richard was saying to the 3 board members and assorted executives. Excuse me, Jake said loudly. Every head in the room turned. Richard's face went through several interesting color changes. What the hell are you doing here, Miller? I told you yesterday. You told me a lot of things yesterday, Richard, most of them lies. Jake walked to the front of the room, pulled out a small remote Marcus had given him, and clicked it. The screen changed from Richard's presentation to a scanned copy of Jake's original email drafts, time-stamped 3 months earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake addressed the board members directly. My name is Jake Miller. Yesterday, Richard Stone fired me for allegedly trying to steal credit for work that wasn't mine. Today, I'm here to show you proof that Richard Stone has built his entire career on theft. Richard lunged forward. Security, get this lunatic out of here. But the security guard who entered wasn't there to escort Jake out. Sorry, Mr. Stone. Mr. Miller has some very interesting documents we all need to see. For the next 20 minutes, Jake laid out everything. The stolen campaign was just the beginning. The evidence Frank had collected painted a picture of systematic fraud going back decades. Richard's embezzlement. The forged documents that stole the company from Jake's grandfather. The pattern of taking credit for other employees' work. The board members' faces grew darker with each revelation. Furthermore, Jake continued, pulling out his grandfather's letter, this company was illegally taken from my family in 1995. I have documentation proving that Miller Associates was fraudulently converted to Henderson Associates through forged signatures and falsified contracts. Board Chairman David Park leaned forward. Are you saying this company legally belongs to you? I'm saying my grandfather built this company, and James Henderson stole it. Richard Stone has continued that tradition of theft right up to yesterday, when he stole my campaign and fired me for objecting. Police sirens wailed outside the building. Richard Stone was arrested for embezzlement at 11:23 a.m. in front of his entire staff and the company's board of directors. The clients from Reynolds Industries, who had returned for contract signing, watched in stunned silence as their new marketing partner was led away in handcuffs. 3 months later, Jake Miller sat in the corner office that had once belonged to Richard Stone. The nameplate on the door read, Miller Associates. Frank had found the original sign in storage. Sarah Chen was his new head of creative development. Marcus Thompson ran the IT department. And Frank Rodriguez? Frank was no longer a janitor. He was Jake's business advisor, the man who had kept faith with a promise for 28 years. Justice, Jake learned, sometimes comes slowly. But when it comes, it's worth the wait.